All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Hope everybody's wrapping up a good quarter today. So hopefully we get some good news from everybody next week. So let me turn on a light here. Okay. So today we have an agenda. So we're going to do things a little bit differently today. So I actually have an agenda thanks to Ryan from the program who made a recommendation. That'd be kind of helpful to know, and I agree. So there's a couple agenda items I'm going to go through today, and just answer them. And then, of course, we're going to open up to questions from program members. But for those who are either watching on LinkedIn, please drop in the chat what city you're joining from. Always like to see who's coming in. And so today we're going to cover three specific topics. One is how to review your quarter and plan for Q3 success. So I'm going to go through that very quickly. How to make a video go viral, right? Because there was a couple of videos that um, are up to, I think, 60 or 70,000 views of mine from last week. I'm going to show you guys specifically the tactics for that. And of course, how to use comments for content. That's right. Actually using comments in your own post for content, because making content is actually very difficult, and it takes time. So that being said, let's get right into it. And of course, I always do a sound check, quick sound check on LinkedIn to make sure that those who are watching on LinkedIn, some people in the program, they actually prefer watching this on LinkedIn. That's totally okay. I just want to make sure that you guys can hear me. Yep, you guys can hear me. So yeah, so you're watching on LinkedIn, hey, or YouTube. We got YouTube going today too. Drop a comment, and yeah, let's just get into it. So, and for those who are on my Zoom, you can either raise your hand or just drop a question in the Q&A box, whatever's easier, and I'll be getting to that. So let me run through the three items, okay? So, all right. And then those who are on the Zoom, can you just let me know, is my sound okay? Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. So let's see. Yep, sounds good. As long as I'm not turning away. Yes, I have to keep that in mind. Gabby, thank you very much. And welcome back. Hope you had a nice vacation. Okay. Yes. So on a train from look at that. Solomon, on a train from San Francisco to San Jose. Solomon, I know exactly which train you are. That's the Caltrain. I used to take that to work every day when I was living in San Jose. So I know which one you're on. Glad you can join us. Look at that. On a Thursday, hanging out on the train, you could be doing a lot of things. So you're here with us. Okay. So so a couple things. So how do you review the quarter? Okay. So whether you're in let's say durable medical devices or capital equipment, what you need to get into a habit of is like the last week of the quarter. Like what's done is already done. There's very little things that you can do at this point to actually move things over, unless it's just like waiting for some signatures, right? So you got to start planning this ahead of time. You know, the good news for you is that technically Q3 does start tomorrow, but tomorrow's a Friday and we have a long weekend. So don't sort of, take too much time off. Take advantage of that slow time where hospitals are going to be closed, and maybe you can't, well, hospitals won't be closed, but you're not going to be like selling. Start planning for Q3. So here's the first thing. To review the quarter, okay? What you want to review are a few key metrics, okay? So review. Okay. One, you want to see the number of meetings set. Okay. Number two, the percentage that those turn into pipeline. Now, this is going to be different for everyone. Okay. But you want to be able to see how many meetings you actually set this quarter. Okay. And what I would say, just so you don't drive yourself crazy, is the number of meetings set with each account, right? So like if one account is one meeting, that's fine. You don't want to count all your meetings, but how much were you able to set, okay? And what percentage of those actually converted into pipeline? Okay, and this is for selling new technology and capital. I'll get to driving utilization in a moment. So this is capital. Let's put this capital review. Okay. Um, Now, number of meetings sets your conversion percentage. Okay. Um, if it's below 60% is bad. It depends on where you're at, but if your conversion percentage in terms of how many of those meetings you set and they don't convert into pipeline, right? If it's below 60%, you're doing something wrong. That means what you're doing up here, you're picking the wrong accounts, you're picking the wrong people to meet with. You have to look at your numbers at the end of the day. If you don't look at your numbers, then like you're just throwing shit against the wall. It's not gonna work, right? So looking at this in terms of how much did I do and how much converted over is super important, right? The other thing you want to look at, number three, pipeline velocity. Okay. So pipeline velocity is going to be important because the other thing you have to understand, and again, each of you, if you don't track this, that's not good. You should start tracking this. And if your company doesn't have a CRM, I don't know how you can function. Like I have a one person business. I have a CRM, but anyways, if you don't have this, you need to come up with your own way of an Excel spreadsheet, something where you track these things, right? But you want to see how fast things move through different stages, right? And more importantly, the way I like to divide this out is you can put, you know, exploration. This is just to make it very simple. Demo, eval, vac, and then close. Okay. And at some point, and of course, I'm sorry, this will be proposal. You have to, even if your data is not that good, you have to start getting this data from now. The one thing I recommend, especially for smaller companies, is look into HubSpot. You can use HubSpot for free to do a lot of this stuff, and then if you upgrade, it's like $150 a month. Now, the next level is going to be a lot more expensive. That's fine. Okay, but the reason why you want to see how much time these are spending in each of these stages, because that's going to inform you where your pipeline can be shortened. So, for example, right, it could be that you find that your a lot of your deals, they spend like 3 or 4 extra weeks when they're sitting in the demo phase, right? They're waiting for a demo to be complete. If that's the case, and this is the insight that I had when I was at Potrero, you can shave off a bunch of time here, because when I saw that a lot of my deals were sitting in demo, I said, okay, well, why is that? Right. So the reason why was it was tough to schedule demos with doctors. They were busy. It's an hour long. So my thought was, well, if the demo's the same every single time, why the hell do I have to meet with the doctor? So that's when I said, I'm going to record my own demo, or if you want to make it tailored, record a demo for each person that you have to send this to, send them that demo. They watch it whenever they want on their own time, and then you schedule like a 10-minute call. That little insights like that took my demo timeline from like 3 weeks to like 3 days. Like that's going to change your pipeline. That's going to change a lot of things, right? Because then the things that are going to end up taking more time, like the evaluation, going through the VAC committee, like then you're taking the time away from something you control, which is the demo or let's say exploration call, and then you're giving more time to the areas where you may not have as much control. If you're, let's say, in the eval, like the evaluation stage, right? For some people, not all, you have to go through an evaluation stage where you send the product to the hospital and they have to try it, right? Well, another insight here. When I was looking at some of my evals, I realized, oh, these things are taking like 2 weeks, right? And that's 2 weeks of the eval. That's not the setup and everything else in the training. So I said, okay, well, they don't need to do 2 weeks. So why don't we just set up, instead of a time based, case based? So converting from 2 weeks to saying, hey, the evaluation process is 2 weeks to saying, let's do 5 cases, right? 5 cases can be done in a matter of a couple of days. So again, ways that you control and influence this. Then there's other things like the VAC committee, you can't control how fast the VAC committee, the value analysis committee that is meets. Okay. So those are the things that on the high level I want you to review. There are of course many other things. The other things that I would say on the meeting set, okay, your meetings. This is one area where most salespeople, I don't think a lot of companies look at this, but as a salesperson, you have to, which is number of meetings or leads, okay, show up rate, okay. Look at the number of meetings, or in this case, number of leads that you were able to get, and maybe this is more focused on you, right, as a salesperson, which is how many leads you're able to prospect and secure. Okay. The next thing is your percent show up rate. Like how many times? What's the percentage? Like for example, for me in my own program, I think I did 55 meetings this quarter. And my percent show up rate is 92%. So that's pretty good, right? Because if that show up rate is low, like you have people canceling meetings or they're just not showing up, that's a problem. You have to fix that. So it's either your meetings are too long or you're not sending out reminders. Like there's little things that you can say, oh, that's what it is, right? For example, my show up rate used to be 60%. Maybe what was it? A quarter ago, it used to be 60 or 70%. What I realized was because when I send meeting invites out, I didn't put any notifications. That's why when people set meetings, they get, they put their email. So on the Google Calendar, I'm able to put notifications like 5 minutes before, an hour before. And then I even get people's cell phone, and then using different software, you can send a text reminder, right? That's really important, right? And then percent closing to the next step. This is really important here, guys. And for me, so for me, I do one call closes. So when somebody's on a call with me, I evaluate them for my program, I close them on that call, right? It either happens or it doesn't happen. For many of you, obviously you're not closing a doctor on a call unless you're selling something that costs less than $10,000. But it's really percent close to the next step. This needs to be higher than 50%. Or I'm sorry, it's not higher than 50%. It needs to be higher than 40%. Okay. Depending on what it is that you're closing. Okay. Because if you have a close rate that's, to the next step, that's less than 20%, that's really bad. Right. So just figuring out, what am I doing here? And, does anybody want to guess what's the number one way to figure out how to fix this? You have to start recording your Zoom calls, right? That's the only way you're going to get better, because it's just like reviewing tape. Like, athletes, like football players, they review tape. You have to review your tape, right? Because then there's something you're doing in those calls that you're not aware of in that moment. And you only see it when you go back and you listen to the tone of voice you make, when you present certain things. There's a variety of things, right? And so that's how you figure out this thing, right? Now, for me, and here's an example, and this is for the CEOs. I know I have some CEOs who are on. Again, this is it's easy for me to adjust this. But for example, my close rate today for my program has always fluctuated around 45 to 52%. Okay, so my close rate went down a little bit, but I'm okay with that. The reason why is because while my close rate went down, the reason why was that my price went up. Okay, so when my program cost a certain amount, um, more people signed up for it because it was less money, right? But I'm okay with my close rate going down a little bit, because everybody who I'm not able to close, it's usually because of price. But I'm okay with that, because then I've made up the loss of closes by increasing the price. All right, so you have to figure that out. And again, the people who you cannot close to a next step, salespeople, like, you got to get better by using certain tools. Go to Google. There's this thing called Google Docs. Okay. Google Docs. Okay. Make your own form 3 to 5 questions. And if you're dealing with a doctor, like send it to them and just ask them for a small favor. Don't do it on the call. And in that form, you can call it a didn't buy survey or like, feedback. Ask them like, some specific question as to what prevented them from moving forward. And you can actually get some insights from that. They might say it's, you know, cost is a problem, not enough information, clinical, because then instead of you guessing as to why your numbers aren't good, like you're at least getting some feedback from the market, right? For a lot of salespeople, this is like very foreign. They wouldn't think of doing this, but you have to do it. And you'd be surprised. Customers and prospects will give you that feedback if you ask. You can even just forget about a Google form. You can even ask on post call, just send a message or something, right? And I always say, like, if you lead with vulnerability, you actually gain a lot from that. So you can tell a doctor, hey, look, no problem at all. You can let's say you run into the doctor and everything, just say, hey, I understand it wasn't a good time, but can you help me out? Can you just give me feedback? Was it something specific to the product or company? Maybe it was specific to me. Please, like, don't hold back. It would be very helpful for me in my career. A physician will tell you. They'll be very straight with you. You know. Um, let's see. Now, as for planning for the next quarter, okay, here's what you have to do. So again, um, get in the habit of doing this. You should be planning for the next quarter at the beginning of the current quarter. So like you should be planning for what you're going to be doing in Q4 at the beginning of Q3. Okay. So we're already at the end of Q2. So what do you do for Q3? You need to not only look in terms of what's in your pipeline, okay, but you need a forecast, okay, and ask yourself, based on what's in my pipeline, what can I confidently say is going to close in Q3, right? Or close to close. So then you focus on that first. Try and close. You should the approach you take at the end of the quarter should be done at the beginning of the quarter, right? So you should be focusing on trying to close some deals at the beginning of the quarter so you're not playing catch up at the very end. And then deals that are going to take a little bit more time, you have more time to nurture, right? So again, you should be planning your quarter based on what you feel is going to close and focusing on that, but then also nurturing things that can close in the middle and end of Q3, and then of course the beginning of Q4. You can't, time kills all deals, right? And so you can't expect, like, for example, if you have a deal that's taking a little bit of a long time, you can't expect to go and focus on another deal and then say, oh, I'll come back to that and they're going to be right where we left off. They might have gone backwards, right? Like you might have moved it to a certain point where they're ready to do an evaluation. If you let a little bit too much time go, something comes up. And it's like you have to do more work to get caught up. So those are the things I want you guys to think about. All right. Any questions about what I just shared before I move on to the agenda item number 2 and 3? Okay. Nothing. Let me check over on. Okay. So now let me show you guys the my screen. 1 second. And let me type something in. Where are we? Here we go. All right. So next agenda item I want to cover is how you whoops, nope, not that's not it. How to make a video go viral on LinkedIn. Okay. That's going to be the next agenda topic. And so we're going to evaluate one of the videos I posted last week. And again, for those of you who are, in medical sales and everything, or at a MedTech company, you're not going to do exactly what I did, but you're going to see how these things work so that you can think about how you apply this to your own company and products. Okay. So on Zoom, let me share my screen on Zoom, and then I'm going to share my screen on StreamYard. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So we're going to cover a couple of things. And actually, let me come back to StreamYard and just make sure that we got things piping in. Oops. So let me come back to StreamYard real quick. There we go. Okay. So let's start with the actual post. Okay. So the one thing that I always mention to you guys is, in order to get attention, like not in order to persuade, you have to get attention, right? That's key number one. Well, key number two to that is what gets attention. And whether you like it or not, it's going to be controversy. Okay. And I'm not saying that you need to make like really outlandish remarks or anything like that, but you have to find ways to stand out, right? Your product is in some ways challenging a status quo, right? Or it should, challenging some kind of standard. So you have to find ways to bring that to light, right? We got a question here. We'll get to that. Yes. Yeah, Scott, I'll let you know. You can watch these. So Scott, Scott was asking about number two. Number two on the whiteboard says percent that turn into pipeline. But Scott, I'll send you a message afterwards. So for those who are in my program, all these coaching calls are recorded and they'll be published in the coaching section in a few days. So you'll be able to go back and review. Okay, so let's start with the actual post. So here's the post. It is, and you don't need to worry about what I'm saying in here, but the headlines are everything. Whatever the content is, you know, the headline is as important, if not more important, because that's the thing that's going to get attention. So why medical sales reps, and again, highlighting and bolding the thing that I want in surgery are not going away. Now, let's talk about why this gets attention. Obviously, the statement gets attention, but why did I make medical sales reps highlighted versus not going away, or the actual statement? The reason why is because identity, as you all know from the program, is a key to persuasion. It's number two most persuasive thing, right behind big fear. Okay. So in here, right, we have two themes: identity and big fear. The big fear is, medical sales reps going away, not going away, right? But with identity, it catches attention quicker. Why? If you're in a crowded room at a party and you hear your name across the room, do you ever wonder why that is? It's because your brain is evolutionarily designed to pick up on cues specifically rated to you. So when you're scrolling through your feed, if you see something medical sales reps, it'll catch your attention, right? That's why, you leading with in your headline the identity of the person you help, neurosurgeon, orthopedic surgeon, physical therapist, whatever, is important, right? So this gets the attention, right? The second thing that makes this post more engagement worthy, okay, and I'm going to show you guys the stats, is that aside from it being video, right? So people will stop and they'll watch the video. But if you notice, this is a very long post, right? Why would I do that? The reason why is that this makes it more engaging for the algorithm. So if you're scrolling on LinkedIn and you see this, you're going to see this where it says see more, right? So you're going to click. Some people will click and they'll read this whole thing. Then they're going to come down here. This thing will be auto playing. They're going to have to play it again. Or they watch this video, and then of course they'll see that there's a long post, and they're going to go back and they're going to read more of this. Okay. So that is going to trigger the hell out of the algorithm, because the algorithm is just going to say people are spending 3-4 times more time on this one post than they normally do. Why? So the algorithm will put this in front of more people. Okay. The next thing is engineering the engagement. Okay. So of course I tagged some companies in here so their employees find out, right? And of course, always remember, like, use a good mix of hashtags. 3 to 5 or 3 to 10 hashtags are good. Okay. So I took this post and I sent it to, I think, 4 or 5 people who, are in medical sales and stuff. I think I sent it to a couple of people in our program and said, hey, why don't you leave a comment on this post? Because I'm expecting a lot of engagement on this. So when that happened, right, at the beginning of the post, and actually let me pull up the report that I did on this. At the beginning of this post, right, there wasn't a lot of engagement, right? If we look at the data on this, there was not a lot of engagement. Okay, here we go. Analyzing my post. Let's blow this up. All right. Oh, it's listed as a video, so I can't present it. So that's okay. Let's close this thing. There we go. So if we look at the actual post, right? Let's go down to so something that you guys have to keep in mind, the golden hour. So on LinkedIn and actually a lot of social media, but specifically LinkedIn, there's this golden hour, which is the first 60 minutes that something is up. That's the most crucial part because that's when the algorithm is looking for engagement for a lot of signals. It says this is a good post we should put in front of more people because the algorithm's trying to test content to see what keeps people online because that's how LinkedIn makes money, right? So for this golden hour analysis, here's what's interesting. There's only 18 likes on it. Okay, so at the end of the first hour that this post was up, there's only 18 likes. Okay, so that's like 0.06% of my following, right? That being said, though, views were probably what made the algorithm like this. So again, 18 likes, two comments, one share. That's it. If I saw those numbers just by themselves, I would have said it's probably not going to be a good post. But there were 1,100 views on it already. Okay. That's the key. Okay. Then the peak of when this algorithm or when this post really had the highest amount of engagement was about 2 hours later. At 2 hours, that's when it starts. You see this blue line, it starts to level off. The blue line is the number of likes. Okay. And at 2 hours later, it was 197 likes, which is pretty good. But there's 43 comments already. There were 15 shares and 25,000 views on this. It's a lot. Okay. And at that point, this is just within 72 hours, right? So if we go back, let's go back to the actual post, right? What were these comments, right? Again, 92,000 impressions, 40 or 50. I'll show you the number of views in a second. But if we look at the comments, because it's a very divisive topic, and it doesn't have to be always divisive, but something that's going to get people's attention where they're compelled to share their thoughts, right? The comments, which there's, this is going to continue to get engagement because there's comments here I haven't even liked or commented back on, like these three. If we go down, there were some deeper comments that were very, very long, right? So as you can see, there's some people. So so Jim Surik left a really nice long comment. This is what LinkedIn wants to see. They want to see people having deep conversations within posts because then that indicates it's good quality content. And it makes sense, right? It wouldn't, if something didn't have long comments, it's not necessarily always good content. But if there's a lot of people discussing something, that's good content, right? That's why, posting a picture of you and your team at a conference, yeah, do that. That's okay. But that shouldn't be the one post of the week you do. Like you actually have to put some thought into some content and posts because that's what's going to drive the engagement. And again, if you're able to get attention, you can channel that attention into more meetings to close. Like this is how this all works, right? It's not meant to be easy, by the way. Okay. So if we look down and there's so many comments I may not be able to get to it, but the theme that you're seeing here is that these comments, they're very long, right? More and more people are engaging with it. And of course, there are people who very much disagree. If you find a topic that people are very split on, very, very much in disagreement, go with that. Like handle the negativity, right? And if you're, again, every company that to my knowledge is supposedly challenging the status quo and trying to change a new standard of care. If you're really challenging the status quo, then you have to be very vocal about that so that A, of course you get the engagement, but B, that's the only way you're going to be able to attract pioneers, early adopters, because that's the signal you need. You can't go find those people one by one. It's very hard. You have to sort of create a fire to attract them to you and to your product. That's how this works, right? So for example, here's a perfect example of what that means. So one of those comments early on was Steve Bell. He's a chief commercial officer at CMR Surgical, big robotics company out of the UK. And so he left a very controversial comment on here. It's got 51 likes already by now. And so I engaged him, because I agreed with what he was saying, but then I engaged him further. I asked him another question. So again, we go back and forth on this, but of course there are other people who, you know, engaged. This comment though, when I read it, I knew already like, oh, this is a very controversial point of view. And his point was like, the way we sell in this industry is 10 years out of date, mixed selling and everything. And he's like, we don't have reps at CMR Surgical. So he has a very strong position on this. So making content is expensive and it takes time, but guess what? here's a simple way to make content. And my thing is, how do I make sure that I push this further? Take a screenshot of this comment, and then I went and posted the comment right here, right? I made a post out of a comment, and then I expanded on it. I'm like, you know, you know, Steve Bell, made a fantastic comment, and I just kind of went. I Instead of me responding to the comment just within that thread, I made a different post about it, right? So I made the post. I put a link to go to the actual post, right? So I was driving even more traffic to my content, and just, this one post by itself got 36 likes, 41 comments, right? And again, the whole idea is, Mike Moore, that's another person in our program, is getting that engagement, right? Now let's look at the actual data on this. So this is Shield. This is an analytics app that I use for my posts. So again, this one video was viewed 92,000 times. 703 people liked it, 61 comments, right? And of course, like, again, I sell to companies and medical salespeople. This hit the people that I'm trying to sell to, right? But even in my medical sales stuff, like, look, there are 582 physicians who viewed this, right? Um, and again, why is this important? It's because when you do a good job, and let me stop sharing and come back to everybody real quick. Okay. So when you do a good job with content, right? Um, then it becomes easier for you to promote your product. You can't promote your product all the time. So for example, you know, you do content that engages the audience you want to engage, it gets their interest, it gets their attention. And then for every 4 or 5 times you have content like that, when you post something that's product related, that's not going to get that engagement, it's mainly for sales or for a webinar or something, it has a chance to go in front of more people, right? So it's kind of like a slingshot method. So anyways, those are the uh, main points that I wanted to point out. Um, and something real quick before I look at some other for those who are in my program, if you have a question, raise your hand or leave a comment. I'll bring you on. And then those who are watching on LinkedIn, you know how it goes. If people in my program don't have ask too many questions, I'll look in LinkedIn and YouTube, and if there's an interesting comment or question, I'll take it. So jump in the comment section if you'd like. Let's see. I'm gonna quickly open my Google Doc and see if there's any submitted questions. So something to consider also is that understanding how these platforms evaluate content and what they want to start pushing out in front of people, right? So at one point, LinkedIn was optimizing articles many years ago. Then they were optimizing video. TikTok, which I'm not on TikTok, but TikTok focuses on views and engagement on videos, and I think that's what LinkedIn is starting to do. That's the only way I can explain why that post did so well. Here we go. Let's see. Any submitted questions? Yes, we have a question from Gabby. I think this is Gabby. I think you submitted this. Uh, Gabby, was this a question you submitted earlier? I think you did actually. Yeah. Um, why can't I see the day that this was posted? Hold on, guys. Um, so I'm gonna answer this question, Gabby. I know you submitted a uh, a video. I'll watch that later. But here's the question. Okay. Let's see. Let me just delete that so everybody can see the question. So the question is, so Gabby, who's the CEO of Bluegrass Vascular, she's asking, how do you hire the best sales reps with good clinical backgrounds? Um, I'll put, okay. Let me grab your name, Gabby, so that way people can follow you and Group Blue Glass Vascular. Hopefully, CEO, CEO of Blue Grass Vascular. There we go. All right. So here's the question. So how do you hire the best sales reps with good clinical background? So these are the things to keep in mind from that I like to think about. And then the follow on to that question is, how do you find the top 10%? So this is where having that strong CEO slash founder brand on LinkedIn is going to be important, because that's going to serve as a way to get the attention of people who want to work for you. Because again, a lot of people, it's not enough just to be at a cool company. They want to know who they're working for, right? So that's the first thing. So again, what's interesting about this approach about having good marketing, using content, everything, is that that helps solve a lot of problems. It helps solve the problem of, how do we get more investors? How do we recruit better people? How do we get more customers? It all ends up going back to marketing, right? And a lot of it's just consistency, right? A lot of the content that you put out, I mean, look, and I'm not telling anybody you have to do this, but just as an example, my thing is, I'm not trying to be well liked. I'm trying to be well known. And so I have to put out content. So sometimes on a Sunday, I'm hanging out with my newborn son, and I was like, my wife shot a cute video. So I'm like, oh, that's kind of funny, actually. Me talking to him about business. I'm like, I'm gonna post that on LinkedIn. Has nothing to do with what I do, but people engage with it, and then it becomes easier for me to start staying in front of them for other things. Now, to answer your question about how do you find best sales reps, it's actually the reverse. You have to find a way to get them to find you, right? That's the first part. That's probably not the answer you want to hear, though. In terms of clinical background, this is tough, right? This is tough. So the easy answer is, I try and look for people. If having a strong clinical background is important, the first thing I try and look is, did they have a clinical background from the past? Like, did they go to school for PT or nursing, or are they former med student or something? Now, you have to be careful with that, right? Because what can happen is that you can be blinded to the fact that they have a clinical background because of their education, and that's not enough. There's people I know who have no clinical background, like formal clinical background, but they're much better clinically than people who did, right? There's a lot of people in Missouri who are like that. Um, the other thing I would say, and Gabby, feel free to either raise your hand or at least type in the chat just to clarify. When you say good clinical background, does that mean that they need to be strong clinically, like in the procedure, right? Or do you want a good clinical background so they can have that conversation when they're trying to sell to a physician? That's something that would be good if you can clarify that. Um, and again, what I would say is that in the process of evaluating somebody, whoever your product lead is, whoever's got the strongest clinical background in the company, like, you should set up your interview to focus on that, right? I don't suggest sending out, like having somebody put a presentation together and stuff, unless it's like a high level or VP. Oh, and Gabby saying, yes, be able to proctor the procedure successfully with no complications. So, um, w- it it depends, and actually, I wish, maybe Gabby, maybe this is actually somebody who I should bring on next week. I'll talk to Mike Moore, who's an executive recruiter. He's in our program. I might bring him on to have him talk us through this, because I would prefer somebody who's actually an expert in these things, on the recruiting side. For me, it depends on the interview, right? Because again, on paper, there's a lot of people who look great on paper, but you have to press them in the actual interview. I think I think part of it is like past success. So, for example, in terms of like a strong clinical background, like if you want a strong clinical background, anybody who's done anything in high tech, like capital equipment, robotics, they're gonna have a strong clinical background. Like you just have to, right? I've noticed that people who are coming from the capital equipment world, let's say robotics, they have a stronger clinical background than the people who sell lower tier products. Because somebody who's selling a lower tier product, they really just have to focus on that one part of the case. If you're selling imaging or capital equipment, you got to know the whole case inside and out. You got to know it really well. Um, that's number one. The second thing, I would not get hung up. This is going to sound counterintuitive. I would not get hung up on finding somebody who has the clinical background for the product you have, right? Meaning that for you, you know, you're in the vascular world. They don't have to come from a vascular background. You need to see that they have the capacity to pick up clinically, you know, whatever's relevant to you guys. And the way you do that is, and again, this is what I like to do, because it tells you a lot about the person. Because keep in mind, the interview process is a honeymoon, right? So whoever's there, like, just take that person and take them down a notch or two. That's what you're really ending up with. So what I like to do is, if I have a screen, if I screen somebody and they didn't go and download my like, especially if it's clinical, if they didn't go and download the clinical papers and read a little bit about the technology, and at least like I got a sense of that, that's not good. But they might be good enough that I push them through to the next phase. At the next phase, I'll make a concerted effort to send them, let's say, some clinical papers, maybe some, just something clinically related. Just say, hey, you know, why don't you go and read this? And I don't tell them like, oh, read this and be prepared. I just tell them like, oh, you know, look over these things. And then when I talk to them again, I ask them like, well, what do you think? Right? Seeing how somebody's going to be able to very quickly pick up clinically on things. If they do that in an interview process, then they're going to be perfectly fine in a clinical setting. The other thing is personality. And again, from a behavior standpoint, um, you can get a sense of this from somebody. You don't want somebody who's aggressive, but you want to get that somebody that, if they have to go toe to toe with a physician clinically, that they can do that. Because a lot of things happen when a clinical person, a clinical specialist cannot do that. The physician decides they want to approach the case a certain way and they use your product in the wrong way. The case doesn't go well and then they're blaming the product. You need somebody to be able to go toe to toe. So Gabby says, so if they call on a different specialty, that's okay too, meaning they have to establish a new network of customer in the new field. Yeah. I mean, and again, it depends on what you want, right? It's very hard to find somebody who comes with the network you want and is also clinically strong, right? You have to pick like what's more important, because it's at one of those things, your company has to be responsible to invest and train that person up, right? So if you're in a position where it's like, hey, we need to get some users, I would default to finding somebody. And actually, Gabby, uh this is, and I should, I don't want to draw it out and erase all that. Because of, I know where you're at in your company. What I would say is, right now you're trying to acquire users and like pioneers and visionaries. Meaning, from a psychological standpoint and a customer segmentation standpoint, those users are going to be okay with an ugly baby. They're going to be good users. They're going to be technical. They're going to be willing to learn everything. So it's okay. So what I would say, if I was in your shoes, if I had to pick, I would go with somebody who has a strong clinical network, who's been in the field for a few years, and you're like, okay, I know that the moment I plug this person in, there's at least 3 or 5 different doctors that they can at least go and have that conversation with. Right? So you're essentially buying into a customer, right? The clinical side is, if they're good clinically, you can have them to help develop that training program, because on the clinical training program, you have to have a strong one, because you have to assume at some point you're going to hire somebody who on paper looks really good, but they're not, right? So having a strong clinical training program is very important. And to quote my late mentor Chris Sells, clinical sells capital. So having a strong clinical team, right, to push the utilization, to push the customer success and everything, that's going to help sell the capital equipment or the technology. Because if you don't have that, that means you don't have strong customer success, you don't have strong utilization, and then that's not going to help with pushing product adoption, right? So what I would say is, in the ideal situation, you hire somebody who, you know, at least has worked with the customer type. So for you, it's like, let's say it's vascular surgeons and nephrologists. Um, if you had to pick between those two things, right? Pick the one, nephrologists. I love you guys. I'm so sorry to say this. Pick the one who's going to have the more pull in the hospital. If I was a betting man between a vascular surgeon and a nephrologist when it comes to buying new stuff, it's going to be a vascular surgeon. So I would go with somebody who knows vascular surgeons well, understands that group's dynamics, their culture, their psychology, all these different things, and obviously comes with that network. Which, by the way, here's a really good point. And Gabby, again, so what I'm saying here is not it's not gospel, right? I could be wrong about this. Okay. And Nick Lococo, I'm going to come back to your comment in a second. There's a temptation, Gabby, to hire somebody who's going to come from a big company. Okay. Here are the reasons why I advise against that. And the people who are in big companies are going to get pissed at me. But again, if we had to play the statistics, right, the chances that person is going to go from a big company, and when I say big, let's say Medtronic or Johnson & Johnson, Boston Sci, and they're going to come to your little startup, and they're going to be able to handle the disorganization. They're going to be able to handle the lack of process, all these things, and they're just going to be able to jump with both feet in and start getting traction. It's very, very rare. It's extremely rare. And let's assume that they can do that. When they come from a big company, their network, unless they're at a director level or above, their network is going to be limited to that one little geography they had. Versus, you should look for somebody who started with a MedTech company at a Series A level or Series B level and grew with them, because at that point, most of those companies have individuals covering large areas. They don't cover a city or even a single state. They cover like a whole region. So you might get somebody who's coming from another company who grew with them, who covered the entire West Coast, right? Washington down to Arizona and maybe some other places, right? And then that person's like, oh yeah, like, look, just off the top of my head, I can think of 10 different customers we can go and reach out to who might be, helpful for this, right? That's the person I would lean to, because again, you not only want customers, right, like new users, you want the right kind of users. And again, I'm making assumptions here, but this is just in my experience. If somebody comes from a big box company, those types of customers, 9 out of 10 times, 8 out of 10 times, whatever you want to call it, most of the time, they're not early adopters. They're early and late majority, in which case they're looking for a full solution that works really well, that has all these things. They don't care about your company or story or anything, right? You want those people who are project oriented, who are going to give you feedback, who are going to be good users, that's who you want early on. So anyways, that was a very long answer, but just to kind of summarize it, again, Gabby's question was, how do you hire the best sales reps with good clinical background? Because of Gabby's company, which, by the way, if you're watching this, it's Bluegrass Vascular. Go check them out. They're a startup, so they're at the early phase of the technology adoption curve. At this point, they need somebody who comes from that background. So in this case, vascular surgery, okay, who has worked in a startup environment, not only because they are used to implementing processes, but who have also come with a larger customer network, or at least one that's spread out more because of the nature of covering, for a startup. Plus, and this is one last thing, Gabby, that I'll mention. And Gabby, if you want, reach out to me and I'm happy to have a deeper conversation on this. The salespeople you hire at this point, and I'm taking from Mark Robert's work. Mark Robert was the first chief revenue officer of HubSpot. For SaaS companies, I agree with this approach. Early on in a startup's life cycle, the salespeople you hire need to be a combo of two things: a salesperson / account executive, and this is where people in MedTech mess up, a product manager. And what I mean by that is that when those people go sell, they're not only account executives and selling to an account, but they're a product manager in that they're bringing information back to HQ about the product, how to improve it, and they're making sure that the customer that they sold to, right, is getting success, because those salespeople will leverage those relationships of like a successful customer and open up a market. Versus if you get a salesperson who, they might be a President's Club winner and quota closer somewhere else, but they come in too early here, and what they're looking for is for you to hand them a playbook, hand them like some materials, and they just go and sell, right? They just sell and move on. that's the wrong person. That person I've very rarely seen succeed at an early stage company. So hope that's helpful, Gabby. If you want to reach out to me, I'll happy to have a deeper conversation. Nick Lococo. Um, oh, and you know what? Ken Husted is on. I hope Ken, if you're still on, can you comment? I would love to actually. I don't know if Ken's able to do this. I would love to bring Ken on live. Ken, I'm going to send you because so for context, Ken Husted is a very seasoned, well-respected leader in the MedTech space, somebody who I look to as a mentor, and who I've learned a lot about. I would love to bring Ken on. So Ken, if you're still on, I'm going to send you a LinkedIn message with the Zoom link. Just hop on the Zoom, and I'm going to bring you on live just to just to chat through. I would really love your. I think a lot of people who are watching on LinkedIn and YouTube can benefit from your experience on this. So, Ken, I'm going to bring you on. Or I'm going to check your Zoom, your LinkedIn Messenger. And Nick, I'm going to answer your question right now. So Nick's questions is about the length of comments. All right, Ken. And click the Zoom link that I just sent you via Messenger if you're still watching and still on, and just join. And I'm gonna bring you on just live. I'd love for you to just share your thoughts. And Gabby, if yeah, Gabby's still on. Gabby, hopefully Ken can join. He's very good at what he does. So Nick, to answer your question, so Nick's question, so Gabby, Ken's question was, does the candidate have a history of driving utilization, not watching utilization just happen, must be clinically competent to drive utilization? Absolutely agree. And this is something that Ken taught me early on in my career, which is placing technology is important, but it's not as important as utilization. You're better off placing, in our case, we were talking about robots. You're better off placing 2 or 3 robotic systems and getting 100% utilization versus 10 and like they're getting 50% utilization. That'll kill a market. So I'm going to see if Ken is able to join. Hopefully he is. I don't know if he's still on. So Ken, check your LinkedIn Messenger. I just sent you a Zoom link. Click that Zoom link and just hop on, and if you can provide some of your insights. So Nick, the question that you asked is, long comments are taken into account. Yeah, absolutely. Because think about it. If you have an algorithm that's running and you have, let's say, 2 different posts, this is what LinkedIn's trying to figure out, really any social media, but specifically LinkedIn. And both these posts, let's say they have 10 to 15 comments. Well, how does an algorithm figure out, well, which one of these pieces of content is better? If one has 10 comments and these comments are long, like people are spending time, that's the key. Is somebody spending more time on this piece of content? Because if they're spending more time on that piece of content, they're spending more time on LinkedIn. And if they're having a good experience, that's going to bring them back to LinkedIn, in which case LinkedIn makes more money, right? Let's see. Oh, I think Ken might have hopped off. So what I might do, actually, I might bring Ken on as a guest, actually. So that, you know what, I think that might be a good idea for our coaching call next week. Maybe let me talk to Ken and see if he can come on as a guest. I think I'm going to start doing that for these, like kind of like a series. Like we'll have like experts and guests on and everything. So yeah, so Nick, again, you got to ask yourself, how do you drive that discussion? And again, keep this in mind. The mistake that a lot of people make, and this is not just LinkedIn, this is even product adoption. It doesn't just take off. Like when a great product is getting adopted, it's not like, oh, it's a great technology and it just takes off. You have to drive that adoption. Just like on LinkedIn, when you see like a viral post, sure, are there some content creators that they post something and just takes off on its own? Yeah, you're not that though, and neither am I. And so you have to actually actively drive the engagement on these posts. So that means one is like, a simple tactic is send the post to a few people who you think will be helpful in commenting and drive some attention. But then also when they comment or anybody comments, go and leave a long response yourself and try and engage people. You have to manufacture the engagement on these things, right? And some people, they don't want to hear that. They want to believe in like freaking magic and fairies, right? Oh, Ken says sorry, technical difficulties. No, it's okay. Try again. Try again, Ken. If you can make it, it'd be awesome. Or Ken, I'm gonna try one more thing. We'll see if it works. I'm gonna send Ken. I'm gonna send you the link to StreamYard, and just click this, and you're gonna be brought into the studio. Have your camera on, and I'll bring you on. But that's if you can make it, Ken. If Ken can make it on, I mean, I know we hit the hour. I'll stay on longer. Actually, I would really like that. I think people would really enjoy this. Ken, try one more time. If you can make it, awesome. I think he's gonna make it. So Nick, yeah. So to my point earlier, you have to drive as Ken was mentioning, you have to drive utilization. You have to drive engagement. There's nothing in life that's just passive, right? If you do things right at the beginning, then yeah, you end up with a very powerful cycle that ends up being a feedback loop, and it scales. Like my post, for example, as you saw in the first hour, that post had 18 likes and 2 comments, but because I drove the engagement right at the very beginning by commenting back on those posts, and then more people started to engage with it, it took off. It's the same thing in political campaigns, same thing with a lot of things. You'd be surprised how much time and effort goes into choreographing certain things, like even a concert, right? Like for a concert, for it to be amazing, it's not enough just to have the band come out and just play the greatest hits. Like there's music involved, there's crowd placement, there's they even hire people to be within the crowd to kind of like bring this energy, right? These things are very important. Let's see. So that was a good question. While we're waiting to see if Ken can join again, if Ken can't join, no sweat, Ken. Any other questions from LinkedIn or YouTube? Right now, I don't have any questions so far from the audience, or at least from my audience. And for those who are wondering, I got a few messages in LinkedIn and YouTube about like how to get on and ask questions. So I'm mainly prioritizing questions from people in my program. If you're interested in my program, check the link in this post for this live stream, or go to my page. There's a free webinar there. Watch that webinar, and then you're able to book time with me to get a free consult, and then see if you're actually a good fit for the program. Let's see. All right. I think we might have gotten everything covered. Any other questions, guys and gals, people? Let's see. Yeah. So just to kind of like end on that note, unless I get a pleasant surprise and Ken's able to join, may not happen though. That's okay. The main thing, the main theme of this live stream, and actually a lot of my talks, is that you can't passively sit back and wait for things to happen. Like you have to really play an active role. You have to put effort into these, especially if you're driving multi-million-dollar deals. You're selling like $500,000 products for beer money in the weekend. Yeah, you can just kind of like, you can just phone it in, you can wing it. But to actually get better, right? And for the younger salespeople who are watching this, you have to put a lot of effort into managing by numbers. Quantitatively, of course, that's managing by numbers, but there's a qualitative thing. The qualitative thing, just going back to this. So look, if we look at what we talked about today, there's reviewing your sales quarter, right? And then we talked about content. Quantitatively, both of them, there's going to be numbers where you can look at the numbers and say, how do we improve these numbers? But there's some qualitative factors that also go into account on the content. You have to be able to sit down and analyze content and say, qualitatively, could this headline have been better? Could I have written the post differently? Could I use different colors maybe? Could I have had a different angle? You have to ask these questions, right? It's not enough just to kind of throw shit up and just say, well, let's see what works. Same thing in sales. The qualitative side, if you are not recording your sales calls, you have to do that. I don't know how else you're going to improve. It's not going to happen by accident or by magic, because if you wait for that to happen, you're going to have a bad quarter or two and you'll get canned. It's that simple. You have to get better qualitatively, because you might be doing something on these sales calls where you're doing a good presentation, all these things. You might be doing or saying something that you're completely unaware of. This is a gift, my friends. I mean, people like Ken Houston and like Chris Sells and all these like really great sales leaders that I know. I mean, back in the day, you didn't have a way to record anything, right? You literally had to go off memory, and then right after that thing was done, you have to do a quick review, a deal rip, something. Right now, a lot of selling is being done virtually, right? Tell the physician you're talking to, hey, thank you so much for joining. By the way, if you don't mind, and this is for my internal purposes, can I record the call? This is just for my notes. If you just say this is for my notes, everyone will say yes. If you're meeting a physician in person, right, or a hospital admin, pull out your phone and say, by the way, I hope you don't mind, just so that, I'm going to make a few notes here and there, but I want to make sure that I capture everything that's important in this conversation. Do you mind if I just record this? Pull out your phone, click the record button, and leave it. And then on your way home, listen to what happened. Listen to how you talk. Listen to how you respond to things. I'll never forget that one of the most important things that happened, or things that I saw in a deal rep or in a role play, was and again, this is Chris Sells, and then Sean Stewart. They were doing a role play. For those who, you don't have to know those names, but those who know them, will appreciate the story. And Sells was pretending to play the part of a surgeon or a hospital CEO, and told Sean Stewart, like, oh, this is a really interesting robotic technology. Maybe we should buy 5 of them, right? And so they did the role play, and then it ended. And Sells went back and pointed out to Sean that he said that, hey, you got way too excited when I mentioned that instead of getting a few robots, we should get 5 or 10. And we all were confused. We said, Sean was just, he was very calm and collected. And what he pointed out was, nope, because his legs were crossed, and the moment he mentioned upping the order, his foot went up like this and showed a little bit too much excitement, right? So little things like that, you have to study tape. There's no other way to get better. It's not going to happen by accident. Okay. So looks like we covered all the questions for today. Again, always appreciate the questions and answers, of course. Thank you, Ken, for joining or trying to join. Hopefully we can get you on next week. And Nick, Salman, and all the others who are on YouTube and LinkedIn, always appreciate your participation here. So that's it for today. I hope you have a great quarter. If you didn't have a great quarter, hey, don't worry about it, right? Study it, figure out what went wrong, okay? And at the end of the day, you get to decide what this quarter means. It could either be a quarter that ruins, makes the rest of your career hard because it's a bad quarter and you just keep getting worse. Or you say, hey, you know what? This quarter happened for a reason. What can I learn from this quarter and change and take action on for the next quarter to be better? Okay? Everybody has the bad quarters. The bad quarters are what make us, right? It's not the good quarters. The good quarters really don't make it. It's the bad quarters and how we treat them. That's what makes us. So for those of you who had bad quarters, don't worry about it. It happens. You just get better. And for those of you who had a good quarter, don't sit back and get relaxed about things. That's when mistakes happen, right? Go back and say, how can I get better, right? What could I have done better, right? If I hit quota at 120%, why didn't I hit it at 200%? Unless you're sandbagging. All right, everybody. Have a great evening. Enjoy your 4th of July weekend, and I'll see you next week.